Is there a hidden connection between Harry Potter's family and Voldemort's? What insane details do we know about Voldemort's true heir? Correct! He really has one! And how did a simple potion turn a talented orphan into the man who must not be named? Hi, I'm Dan. Keep watching to find out these unnerving details about Voldemort's past. What? We all got his name wrong? No doubt Voldemort has become one of the most recognizable villains of our time. We hear his name all over the world, but have you ever doubted its pronunciation? As it turns out, all of us have said it wrong. JK Rowling herself confirmed on Twitter back in 2015 the T in Voldemort is actually silent. She said, but I'm pretty sure I'm the only person who pronounces it that way. The name itself has French origins, and in the French language, everyone seems to hate the letter T. Just like the French pronunciation of Robert is Robert, Voldemort works the same way.
Voldemort is my past, present, and future.
Voldemort is loosely translated as flight from death, which turned out to be his biggest fear in life. Another brilliant metaphor from Rowling. His name is pretty darn poetic though. As for Riddle, it must be pretty disappointing to be referred to as he who must not be named, considering all the meaning he put into it.
I was going to keep my filthy muggle father's name. No. I fashioned myself a new name. A name I knew wizards everywhere would one day fear to speak when I became the greatest sorcerer in the world.
I wonder, did Voldy himself know what the original pronunciation was? Well, seems like it's a good thing no one actually speaks his name, right?
We do not speak his name. Voldemort.
Voldemort.
Lord Voldemort.
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 Like and comment below if you would also dare to say his name aloud. Messed up origins. Tragically left alone at the very beginning of his life, Tom Marvolo Riddle was born on New Year's Eve at Wolves Orphanage. Who could have guessed at the time that the poor half-blood orphan would grow up into the Dark Lord, one of the most ruthless and violent wizards? Looking back at his pretty messed up origins, it's easier to explain who really kick-started the story of Voldemort. To start with, Tom wasn't born out of love. As Rowling reveals in The Half-Blood Prince, his mother, Merope Gaunt, used a love potion to win the affections of Tom Riddle Sr. and got pregnant. This act, of course, had consequences. Voldemort was incapable of love, having never been the product of it. Things got worse. When his muggle dad snapped out of the effects of the love potion, he left and took all their money with him. His mother ended up heartbroken, depressed, poor, and miserable. She gave birth to a kid, named him after his father Tom and Grandpa Marvolo, and died shortly after. Voldemort never had much love and grew up a cold and merciless young wizard who was obsessed with family purity and greatness. As a kid, he assumed his mother was a muggle, and it wasn't until his teenage years at Hogwarts that Tom found out his true origins. He wanted to establish himself as a pureblood and keep Salazar Slytherin's legacy so much that he basically killed his own father's family to cover up any evidence of his association of muggles. He hated mudbloods and half-bloods, even though deep inside, he always knew he was one of them.
To her, the mixture of magical and muggle blood is not an abomination, but something to be encouraged.
However, the truth is, his pureblood mother's family was not so pure. In addition to the violent, crazy relatives, abusive grandfather, and ex-prisoner uncle, there was also inbreeding. Their obsession with the pureblood heritage of Salazar Slytherin led to a history of marrying their cousins. I guess now we can assume where everything went wrong in the first place. But even this is not the most mysterious part of Voldemort's origins. If you trace his family tree back far enough, Voldemort could actually be related to the Potters. Harry and Voldemort are both distant relatives of the brothers in the story of the Deathly Hallows, who received the gifts from death. So it's easy to assume the two are linked. The Gifted Orphan. Little Tom had to spend his childhood, including every summer, at an orphanage all by himself, feeling how different he was from the other kids.
She wants me looked at. I think I'm different.
As Tom got acquainted with his magical powers, he started using them to manipulate and torture the other orphans.
There have been incidents with the other children, nasty things.
Those incidents included hanging a boy's pet rabbit and silencing 2 other kids after he took them into a cave and did unspeakable scary things with his powers. Not to mention frightening kids by talking to snakes and moving things without touching them.
I can make things move without touching them. I can make animals do what I want without training them. I can make bad things happen to people who are mean to me. I can make them hurt.
Noticed any resemblance between the youngest and oldest incarnation of the Dark Lord? Believe me, there's an extremely interesting clue behind it, but I'll put my cards on the table a bit later. Now, let's get back to the main question. What turned a young prodigy into a true monster? As a student of Hogwarts, Tom showed a flair for magic and was even a prefect. Dumbledore admitted that Voldemort was one of the most brilliant students the school had ever seen. Quiet, smart, and charming, he was a so-called teacher's pet.
I don't have a home to go to. They wouldn't really close Hogwarts, would they, Professor?
But even though he was a perfect student, his passion for the dark side was always there. At school, he brought together a group of Slytherin bullies and became their leader. Many of them went on to become Death Eaters years later. He also used his powers to manipulate the teachers at the school, but Dumbledore was the only one he was not able to influence. His knowledge of Tom's true origins and nature was one of the many reasons why Riddle was so afraid of Albus his entire life.
Well, I'm like you, Tom. I'm different.
As promised, time to spill the truth. Remember, what if I told you that playing Lord Voldemort is actually a family affair? Tom in the orphanage is played by Hero Fiennes Tiffin. Yeah, that Harden guy from After. In real life, he is a nephew of Ralph Fiennes, who played the most famous version of the Dark Lord. If this detail surprised you, just wait till you hear who Voldy had an affair with, which resulted in an heir. Professor Riddle. Can you imagine studying under one of the most powerful wizards in the world? And what if I told you that this wizard could have been Voldemort himself? Young Tom actually wanted to become a teacher at Hogwarts, but those plans went down a slightly different path. Right after graduating Hogwarts with all A's, Tom Riddle asked if he could stay, hoping to take the position of Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, but was turned down due to his young age. Oh no, it's no good breaking dream careers of those with such ambitions and powers as Tom. History has some pretty good examples of this. Right after the disappointing refusal, he started his first job as a salesman at Borgin & Burke's. But, I forgot to mention, the shop held a vanishing cabinet and rare magical objects, ready to become horcruxes. Surely it's a coincidence that such a brilliant wizard took on a shop boy position. Years later, Tom hadn't given up on Hogwarts. He returned and attempted to get a job again. Dumbledore was headmaster back then and knew all about Riddle's manipulations and his phenomenal new Voldemort alias, so obviously turned him down. Voldemort left and cursed the job right afterwards, as he decided that no one else deserved to hold the position for more than a year. That's the reason why every single year we saw a new professor of Defense Against the Dark Arts. Who knows, maybe the walls of the school would have inspired the Dark Lord to become a better person. But as we all remember, it's not a good idea to allow villains to teach kids.
What are you doing?
Teaching.
Is that a student?
Technically, it's a ferret.
Okay, maybe a bit of villain in a teacher can be funny. Daddy Tom. If you've only read the books or watched the films, you're probably thinking right now, what the hell is he talking about? But if you're a true fan who made it to the Cursed Child, you definitely know that the Dark Lord ended up becoming a father. His only daughter, Delphine, was born in Malfoy Manor, sometime before the fateful Battle of Hogwarts. Who the hell is the mom then, you ask? Let me give you a hint. Have you noticed that Voldemort and one of his closest, most devoted followers, Bellatrix Lestrange, were more than just friends? That's right, guys. I guess some private details were left out of the books and movies. Keeping a family-friendly rating takes what it takes, right? Even though Voldemort's history tells us he's incapable of love, things must have been relatively serious at some point. According to Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, we don't know much about Delphine. When both of her parents died in the battle, she was still a baby, the last living descendant of Salazar Slytherin. Delphi inherited a lot of both parents' traits, and she sure followed in her father's footsteps. She was cruel, sadistic, violent, uncontrollable, and short-tempered, which led her to Azkaban for killing a student. She never attended Hogwarts, but still possessed frightening powers nobody was able to explain. I guess genes are genes, right? Imagine Delphine being born at the same time as Harry. This actually could have added a darn new spice to this amazing story. What do you think? Write down below in the comments. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe and stay awesome.